Hello there, friends. We're back with American Miscellany. So this beautiful book of essays was published in 1865. The publisher, Robert Sears, assures us that it is a volume full of essays, both historic and scientific. So I believe we're going to start on one of our historic essays. We're working on essay number 110, Trajan and Robert Fulton, the connection of their works. So just quickly, so you can get a great idea of how completely random this book is, our previous essay was self-government, essay number 109. So we're just naturally moving on to these fellows, Trajan and Robert Fulton, here on page 267 of American Miscellany. Let's go ahead and get into essay number 110. Trajan and Robert Fulton, the connection of their works. By the way, connection is spelled with an X instead of a CT. That's so cute. Okay, the close of the 1st century beheld a Spaniard on the throne of Rome. He was a native of Seville and was at the head of the army in Germany when the aged Nerva called him to share the cares of the government. The death of the old emperor soon after occurred, and Trajan was left to reign alone. When the eyes of the millions were turned towards him with the most profound interest, he proved himself to be adequate to his place, and for nearly 20 years continued to fill the Roman world with the renown of his achievements. His immediate predecessors had professed to maintain the peaceful policy of Augustus, but their vices rendered them quite incompetent to carry it out with dignity and success. Yeah. Dignity that's an important one. Okay, his immediate predecessors had professed to maintain the peaceful policy of Augustus, but their vices rendered them quite incompetent to carry it out with dignity and success. The concessions which Augustus had won by diplomacy they could not keep either by wisdom or by force. Although they were troubled by incursions on their eastern borders, yet the Roman name was most grossly insulted by the barbarians of Dacia, north of the Danube, who crossed the river, ravaged the country, defeated the legions, and even imposed a tribute on Domitian. At last, the humbled army were surprised to see an imperial soldier at their head marching on foot, sharing their fatigues and content with their fare. Under the eye of Trajan, the ancient discipline and valor were revived, and the Dacian king, Decebalus, ranked among the first warriors of his age, was thrice defeated. His hordes were driven back beyond the Danube, and his kingdom was reduced to a province of the empire. The victories of Trajan, however, would hardly be thought of now, but for the stony records which proclaim to the traveler along the confines of Dacia the bold projects of the emperor to spread the civilized arts into those northern regions and to naturalize those savage tribes to the Roman life and manners. Indeed, a fresh reminiscence of his history was brought to light 10 years since by a Servian fisherman who discovered in the bed of the river near the village of Praona a bronze bust of Trajan. About 25 miles above this spot are yet to be seen the remains of that splendid bridge of stone which Trajan reared across the Danube at a point where the river is 2,400 feet in width, guarded it with strong castles at both ends, and fitted it to be a permanent thoroughfare to connect his new conquest with the old dominion. Little did he think that it would ever fall by hands of the Romans. Least of all could he imagine that his successor, acknowledging his incapacity to govern so wide a realm, would destroy this noble monument of imperial power. At this day, the bases of the castles are visible and buttresses 18 feet thick. 11 piles may be seen in the bed of the river at low water. Apollodorus of Damascus, the great architect of the time, whose name is associated with much of the magnificence of Rome, planned and executed the structure, animated, no doubt, by the full belief that he was building for posterity. Not a long time after the completion of the bridge, the northern traveler of the 2nd century enjoyed the advantage of a well-constructed road, extending from the Danube far into the interior of the savage Dacia, terminating near Bender, about 50 miles from the Black Sea. It was a bold conception of the emperor, and its traces indicate his faith in the principle that whatsoever is worth doing at all is worth doing well. For great difficulties were overcome, and in some places it is cut with signal skill through solid rock. 1700 years ago, a man might pass with some degree of comfort through that land, but in these days, if one venture to travel there, as he finds himself seated in a carriage of the rudest form and jolted over a rough and ruddy Moldavian wagon track, dragged too by ponies destitute of all tackle except for a few frail cords, with many a sigh will he call to mind the signs of civilization in the days of Trajan. But special praise is due to the emperor for his efforts to improve the navigation of the Danube and to make it subserve, through all time, the interests of commerce. As the geographer looks upon the map of Europe and beholds this magnificent river springing up in the very heart of the continent, fed by 60 streams, which flow down from the Carpathian and Alpine heights, bringing its constant tribute to the feet of many ancient and mighty cities, now boldly pushing its way through mountain ramparts and making forest echo its roar of waters, and now again spreading itself out into a lake of beauty, reflecting scenes of the richest fertility upon its glassy bosom, then rolling on with turbid and rapid volume, till at last it blends with the waves of the Euxine to wash the coast Asia. How can he avoid being filled with admiration at the sight of such a splendid avenue of commerce, and acknowledging the design of Providence to make it the means of bringing kindreds and tribes of men together in a friendly interchange of benefits, and uniting them in bonds of social intercourse. Ages have rolled away, however, during which the scholar, the merchant, the voyager, and the philanthropist have read in the records of geography that the Danube is not navigable to the Euxine on account of the cataracts. Too true, indeed, but what a melancholy testimony is this to the leaden slowness of Europe in the career of improvement, and to the long, long recession of art, science, and civilization in the old world. For in the reign of Trajan there was a spirit of enterprise awakened and fostered by his genius, which could mock at such obstacles to its course as these cataracts that sank to littleness before the march of Roman art. This section of the Eisenthor, or Iron Gate, on account of the bold sweep of the lofty banks and the enormous rocks of a ferruginous color which make the river's bed, causing the passage to appear as if entirely closed up, extending not much further than 7,000 feet, was nearly surrounded in the time of Trajan by a large canal beautifully chiseled out according to his directions, designed by him as a lasting boon to northern Europe. But alas, he left no heir to his comprehensive views and his lofty spirit. His plans were abandoned, and this great work was left to dilapidation and ruin. I guess the rain helped, but mostly ruin. This great work was left to dilapidation and ruin, to be almost choked up by falling stones and earth, to remain for centuries a monument to the solemn truth. A monument to the solemn truth that the old Roman civilization had then spent its last energies, and that humanity must pause in its career of progress to wait for some new impulse ere it could advance another step or gain new triumph over the gloomy reign of barbarism. Be patient, bide thy name. This is God's lesson taught by history to every honest worker in the cause of man. It is taught here, the night is far spent. The impulse long waited for has come at last. It has come not from the bosom of paganism, but of Christianity, not from the shores of the Tiber, but of the Hudson. The mind which grappled successfully with the problem of applying the expansive power of steam to navigation set at work a moral force which has lately reached the borders of Dacia, has broken the deep sleep of ages, has given to the people new ideas, has kindled a desire for knowledge, has opened new plans for enterprise, has called art from its tomb to renew its youth, and having disinterred the ship canal of Trajan around the Eisenthor, is giving to the work its finishing stroke and causing it to be a connecting link between the commerce of the Western and Eastern world. The manner in which steam navigation was commenced on the Danube, it may be well to record. The first experiment was made a little more than 12 years since by Mr. Andrews of Vienna. The want of public confidence in the practicability of the plan was the cause of much discouragement during 3 successive years, when the voyage was often made with only a single passenger. At length, the great fair at Semlin roused public curiosity, and 300 persons embarked at Pest. From that day, the project became very popular with the Hungarians and the Turks, and Count Szczecny Count Szczecny of Pest, who possesses ample fortune, has devoted his time, talents, and purse to its promotion. He visited England in order to obtain the best machinery, engaged English engineers, and stimulated Metternich and the Austrian emperor to patronize the work. The position thus taken by Austria is an important one, considered politically, as it is asserting a general right to the navigation of the Danube, raising up a barrier against the ambitious encroachments of Russia, and bringing Christian and Muslim countries into intimate communication. Immense and far-reaching as must be the effects of steam navigation upon the social state of the world, they will never transcend the measure of the hopes which glowed in the breast of Robert Fulton. His was a great soul. It was ever inditing the bright prophecies of the future. It was a living spring of philanthropy. Herein lay his great strength to brave disappointments, failures, and neglect. Although the bent of his genius led him, even in early life, like Michelangelo, to seek his amusements in the shops of mechanics and in works of art, yet we see the moral grandeur of Fulton's mind in the fact that his strongest impulse to action was his earnest sympathy with the fortunes of his race. A universal free trade, Says Mr. Colden, his biographer, was his favorite theory in political economy, and the war system of the Old World he considered as the cause of misery of the greatest portion of its inhabitants. He cherished a firm belief in the progress of society and the ultimate triumphs of peace, and in a final prevalence of spirit of brotherhood among the nations of the earth. The different effects which have flowed from the lives of Trajan and Fulton exhibit in a striking light how much can be done by science and how little by war for the civilization of mankind. In spite of all the emperor's achievements in Dacia and his colony of 30,000 Romans settled there, 17 centuries have rolled over the inhabitants of that rude country without beholding one step of moral progress, or a single change for the better in their social state. The celebrated Tuscan column, reared by Apollodorus in honor of Trajan, still stands in the Eternal City, covered by basso relievos, portraying the appearance and manners of the Dacians. If these same figures had all been just carved by the hand of powers, they would represent as well the Dacians of the present day as those of the age of Trajan. They wear the same mean costume and use the same awkward implements of agriculture. They live in the same vile kind of straw huts, compared with which an American log cabin is a palace. They are generally small in stature, ignorant, idle, faithless, clothed in sheepskins, and either going barefoot or wearing sandals. The cattle of their farms appear untamed and wild, and their dogs are very wolves as to ferocity. In every point of character, these Wallachians and Moldavians are inferior to the inhabitants of Servia on the opposite side of the river, who are more immediately under Turkish rule. What a spectacle in the sight of Christendom! A nation of Europe living 1700 years without the least sign of improvement. Their state is one of dull and dreary monotony. But a better time is coming. This gloomy night of barbarism is beginning to pass away. The whizzing sound of the first steamer, which disturbed the repose of these northern wilds, was the herald of an auspicious change and the impulse given to the march of Christian civilization by the toils of Robert Fulton has already extended from the banks of the Hudson to those of the Danube and the Euxine. May heaven speed it, and the stars in their courses favor it, until it shall girdle the earth with a zone of light, and hasten the era when no more of the separating frith or ocean shall make enemies of nations, but all, like kindred drops, be mingled into one. Yea, colonialism!